So this subwoofer right here, could this be the perfect sub? It's lightweight, lighter than most big boxy subs. It's slim in profile. It can be placed under furniture, under a table, behind your gear. It can really be placed anywhere in the room. It can be run wired or wirelessly if you're using Buchart's own powered speakers. You can also run this and do room correction with this Zen microphone, and it will calibrate the subwoofer to your room. This is the Buchardt Sub 10, the very first subwoofer from Buchardt, and I've had it here for several weeks, listening to it, testing it wirelessly, testing it wired, testing it with all the speakers I have here, as well as the Buchardt A700 LEs that I reviewed a while back. So let's talk about this subwoofer from Buchardt. Why I say this might just be the perfect subwoofer. What's unique about this subwoofer in particular, it's different from almost any sub that I've ever tried. Now, all the subs I've tried in the past were the typical box shape, right? And they had the drivers in there. Some of them are ported, some of them are sealed, some of them are uber powerful and have to be careful with the placement on most of these subs. So when this Sub 10 came and I unboxed it, I was worried that it was going to take me hours to get it to blend with my main speakers. Now I have many speakers here I tested it with. There are some speakers, even full range speakers that go down to say 35 Hertz. They can benefit from a subwoofer because the Buchardt Sub 10 goes all the way down to 20 Hertz. That's the lowest it can reach. Now, as I said, when I unboxed this sub, I noticed how thin it was, how skinny, how slim, how light. Now, it's not light like hollow, but it's much lighter than a lot of those big box subs. So I recently reviewed the REL Classic 99. That's a beautiful sub, probably my favorite REL subwoofer that I've had through here in regards to looks, design, and even sound. The Buchardt Sub 10 takes a quite a different approach. It's a sealed cabinet here, of course, and it's slim and skinny. And Buchardt says you can put this under a couch, under a table, up against the side wall. You can put it behind you if you're running it wirelessly, pretty much anywhere you want to place it. So before we talk about my experience on placing this sub, let's just go over the features really quick. On the front of the sub, you'll see a 10-inch bass driver. Here on the back, you have the control panel. And let's just jump right to the control panel and I'll explain all of the controls on the back and what you can do with this subwoofer. All right, so here is the rear control panel of the Buchardt Audio Sub 10. You have an output, balanced or single-ended RCA XLR. You have your line in. This is where you'll plug in your sub output from your integrated. If it has dual, you can plug in both. If it has one, you just go to the left channel and it'll work perfectly fine. There's also balanced XLR inputs. You have your power jack. Yes, it does come with a power cable, of course. There is a power button here. Up top, you have your phase. All subwoofers have a phase control. Kind of turn that until the bass sounds its fullest and most pleasing. I usually leave it at 0. It always works fine in this room at 0, but some rooms and systems may vary. Here is your level. It's basically the volume level of the sub. This has a 1200 watt Class D amp built in to power that 10-inch driver. So depending on your sub output of your amp integrated or preamp, some preamps have a fixed output that's very low. Some have a variable output that goes up with the volume. So you're going to want to put this volume to where the bass blends seamlessly with your speakers. And with a lot of subs, that's hard to do. With this sub, it seemed to happen pretty easily. So not a problem. Here's your pairing. If you're using it with Buchardt wireless speakers, such as the A700s or the A10s, for example, you pair it to the Platin hub here. It'll tell you when it's connected. Once you pair it to the hub, you can then open up the Buchardt app and integrate it with the room correction, what have you. Now down here, it has a standby mode. You can turn it on or auto. I just leave it on. That way, when there's no signal going in, after a bit, it'll shut itself off. Here is the crossover settings. You have flat all the way down up to 150 Hertz, I should say. Flat is going to allow every bass frequency coming from your integrated amp sub output. It's going to allow all of those frequencies to come through. That's going to be the mids, So you're not going to want to leave it on flat unless you like that kind of sound. Some people might, but you can set it to 40 hertz, 60 hertz with those triangle duettos. I liked it between 80 and 100. I listened to it with both. They sounded great with both, but at 100, it was fleshing out the mids a little more because that's more getting into that mid-range area. Then you can go 120 or 150 hertz. So if your speakers, say, go down to 40 hertz, try 80 hertz, and that'll fill in the blanks, and it'll help blend it seamlessly with your speakers. So that's the rear control panel of the Buchardt Sub 10. It's pretty easy. It's pretty self-explanatory. So I had my work cut out for me. I have several sets of speakers here, as well as the active L700 LEs from Buchardt. I wanted to test this sub in every possible way. I wanted to try it with the room correction that you can do via the Buchardt app. And I wanted to run it wired with my main speakers in my main system. And that's how I started. Now, when I get a sub in here to review, I immediately put it in the worst spot. I put it in between the two speakers because there's no wall reinforcement, and it's usually where the bass will have its weakest output. So I set that sub in between the two speakers. On the back, you saw the crossover selections. I set it to 100 hertz. And I started running it with my Triangle Magellan 40th anniversary duettos, which I believe go down to around 40, 45 hertz. Now I'm in a 13 by 18 space. I hooked up the sub output of my then preamp I was using, and instantly heard the bass output from the sub, but it was turned up to around 11, 12 o'clock. I had to turn it down to 9 or 10 to blend seamlessly with those triangle speakers. Once it was on and I was in my chair, I could not tell that these bass frequencies, both in the low end and in the mid-range a bit, I could not tell that they were coming from this little sub placed right between the two speakers. The sound appeared as though it was coming from the main speakers, as it was one whole unit. And that is the quickest I've ever been able to blend a sub with main speakers. It literally took me 5 seconds of just adjusting the volume and setting that to 100 hertz. All of a sudden, the speakers seemed to sound more relaxed and more effortless. That's because the subwoofer was filling in those bass notes that the speakers either put out in low quantity or volume, I should say, or just doesn't put them out at all. And so I was like, well, this is a fluke. Let me move this sub over to the side wall. So I put it against the side wall, and I have like a 20-foot long subwoofer cable. So I was experimenting all around the room. When I put it on the side wall, I was expecting to get some kind of weird boominess or room issues. Absolutely none. It was blending perfectly with the speakers. I put it behind my audio cabinet. I cleaned out some space there. I set it back there. Lo and behold, it was filling this room with bass. There was no issues, no problem. So I was like, wow, this sub is really, truly versatile. So this sub has a 1200 watt amp inside, powering that 10-inch driver, a Class D 1200 watt amplifier. When I first saw it, I said, there's no way this little skinny guy is going to be able to shake my walls or have me feel the vibrations. So I set it in the system. I put on some of my favorite bass, low bass, heavy tracks. Welcome to My World, Depeche Mode Live in Berlin album. The first 2 minutes of that song has some of the deepest bass, and it'll test a subwoofer's capabilities, especially if you're in a larger room. I set that track on, and the sub, I think, was set to noon on the volume, and I had it back in between the two speakers. And all of a sudden, the room was pressurized. Boom, 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 right? And you feel it. And my chair started to vibrate a little bit. I could have had it shaking if I turned up the sub. But the goal with any subwoofer is not to hear the boom of the subwoofer. The goal of a 2-channel stereo subwoofer is to make it disappear in the room and make it sound like this bass is naturally coming from the speakers or the air. And that's exactly what was happening. It wasn't localized bass. There was no issues here. It was just providing clean, detailed, tuneful bass. But it wasn't so tight that it was sounding lean or weird, right? It was just loose enough. It's not a loose bass. It's not sloppy. It's not creating a veil. It's not creating warmth, but it is a beautiful bass that fills in that foundation as well as fleshes out some instruments when you're playing them through your system. So the sound quality, the bass quality of the Sub 10, I found to be remarkable. The ease of blending it with speakers, remarkable. The ease of placement, remarkable. And I haven't even touched on running it with the A700 LEs and using the room correction yet. So let's talk about that a little bit. Now, moving on to the A700 LEs, which are Buchart's powered tower speaker. I reviewed those a while back. I'll link to that in the description below if you want to see it. But hooking up this sub to them can be done wireless, right? And you just use the Buchardt app to set up everything. You do the room correction in the Buchardt app, and it sets up the speakers as well as the subwoofer and blends them absolutely perfectly within your room. You walk around with this Zen mic, which is a really, let me go get it. So this is the Zen mic from Buchardt, and you use this mic. This is an optional accessory. You can use your phone's microphone, but I found better results with the Zen mic, absolutely perfect results with the Zen mic. You walk around the room, corners, ceiling, floor, you stay some space from your speakers. You do that, and the app and the system will calibrate everything to your room and your room size, and everything will blend perfectly. And lo and behold, it did just that. So I was running this sub wirelessly, just plugged into the wall, of course, but you don't have to hook any cables up to it using it in this way. So owners of the Buchardt A10s, right, or the A700s, this is a perfect addition to those speakers to not only add that uber low bass foundation, but to add a little bit of juice in the upper, right? Depending on how you set the crossover, though. You can set it to where you're only hearing the deep notes, right? So it's up to you how you want to set this up, but Buchardt makes it super easy. So another very unique feature of this subwoofer is master tunings. Just like the A700s, just like the A10, Buchardt ships the Sub 10 with a USB stick, and you can download one of 3 tunings from their website. There's something like extra deep, or there's flat, and there's not really a ton of them like they have with the speakers, but it's that fine tuning that you can do to your room with those master tunings, and I think that's pretty cool. You basically insert it into the USB input on the back of the sub, press a button or two. Within a few seconds, it's loaded into the sub, and that tuning is there for you to use. You can go back to the standard flat, which is what I preferred in this room. I thought the flat tuning was perfect for my room and the speakers I tried with it. So I found that this sub is about as close to the perfect sub as you can get. It's lighter than most subs, though it's not lightweight. It's just lighter, easier to move, easier to place in the room. It's easiest to blend with the speakers, the easiest experience with a sub that I've had to blend with speakers, right? It can be room corrected with the mic and the Buchardt app and blended with your speakers perfectly if you're using Buchardt powered speakers. There's also a way to do it, room correction, if you're not using Buchardt speakers. I talk about that in my written review, which I'll put a link below. It's $12.99. It's under $1,300 from Buchardt. What else can I say? The master tunings. I've never experienced a subwoofer quite like it, and I think it's forward thinking. This is a sub designed for the future. Lighter weight, smaller size, easier to place, can be run wired or wirelessly, can be tuned with master tunings, can be room corrected within the app, Buchart's own app. So there's so much going for this, and whether you're using it with regular speakers wired up to your integrated amp or preamp subwoofer out, or whether you're using it with Buchart's powered speakers, it's a solution for either one of those. And I absolutely adore it, running it with the Triangle 40th Anniversary Duettos. It's really upped the performance by a hair because those are some amazing speakers, but it made them a little bit better by just making everything sound bigger and more fluid, right? And the details are still there popping out in space. Amazing, amazing addition to this system with those speakers. So I can highly recommend, if you're looking for a subwoofer and you don't want it to be a challenge to place or blend with your speakers. You don't want it to be huge and heavy where you're breaking your back walking around. I can highly recommend this subwoofer. Be sure to check out my written review over at my website, link in description below. So yeah, an easy recommend of the Sub 10 from Buchardt. I hope you liked this video. If you did, thumbs up and subscribe. I have many more to come. I will see you guys really soon in the next one.